Have you ever felt like you were working harder than everyone around you, yet somehow you are still falling behind? Maybe you work longer hours than your colleagues, sacrifice your sleep, and push yourself every day. But when you look around, the people who seem to work less are moving ahead faster. It can feel confusing and unfair. This is the story of a man who believed that hard work alone was the key to success until life taught him a powerful lesson. In a quiet farming valley lived a 32-year-old farmer named Thomas. He owned a small 10-acre farm that he inherited from his father. Thomas believed in only one thing: hard work. Every morning, he woke up at 4 a.m. before the sun rose. While the rest of the village was asleep, Thomas was already working in the fields. He planted seeds by hand, watered crops using buckets, and removed weeds himself. His hands were rough and often bleeding. His back hurt constantly. But Thomas wore his pain like a badge of honor. "My grandfather farmed like this," he would proudly say. "Hard work is the only honest way to succeed." From sunrise to sunset, Thomas worked without stopping. By night, he was so tired that he barely had the energy to eat dinner. His wife, Sarah, often watched him with worried eyes. "Thomas," she said one evening gently, "you're pushing yourself too hard. There must be a better way." But Thomas shook his head. "Success requires sacrifice," he replied. "If I just work harder, everything will improve." The other farmers in the valley often talked about him. "That man works harder than anyone," they would say. But despite all his effort, Thomas's farm barely produced enough crops to survive. Each harvest was just average. Some seasons were even worse. Right next to Thomas's farm lived another farmer named Richard. Richard was the same age as Thomas and owned a farm of the same size, but their lifestyles were completely different. Richard worked only from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. about 6 hours a day. He used modern irrigation systems. During busy seasons, he hired part-time help. In the evenings, he spent time reading, relaxing, or traveling with his family. Yet somehow, Richard's farm produced almost twice the crops of Thomas's farm. This reality bothered Thomas deeply. One summer, a terrible drought hit the valley. Water became scarce, and every farmer struggled to keep their crops alive. Thomas decided the only solution was to work even harder. He began waking up at 3 a.m. instead of 4. He carried bucket after bucket of water from a faraway well, sometimes making nearly 50 trips in a single day. His body screamed with exhaustion, but he ignored it. "Hard work never fails," he repeated to himself again and again. Meanwhile, Richard adjusted his irrigation system so that water was delivered directly to the plant roots during the cooler hours of the day. Very little water was wasted. After 2 exhausting weeks, Thomas's body finally gave up. While carrying another heavy bucket, his vision suddenly blurred. His legs collapsed beneath him, and the bucket fell, spilling water into the dry soil. Thomas dropped to his knees, gasping for air. His wife Sarah found him lying weakly between the rows of crops. The doctor later gave a serious warning. "Your body is shutting down," he told Thomas. "You are dehydrated, sleep-deprived, and close to a heart attack. If you continue like this, you may not live to see the next harvest." That night, lying in bed, Thomas stared at the ceiling. For the first time in his life, he felt doubt. "I worked harder than everyone," he whispered to Sarah. "Why am I still failing?" Sarah held his hand softly. "Maybe hard work alone isn't the answer," she said. Those words stayed in Thomas's mind. A few days later, once he regained some strength, he did something he had never done before. He walked to Richard's house and knocked on the door. Richard welcomed him warmly and invited him to sit on the porch overlooking the green fields. Thomas spoke honestly. "I work twice as long as you," he said, "but your farm produces twice the results. I need to understand why." Richard smiled and walked to his tool shed. He returned holding 2 axes, one old and dull, the other sharp and shiny. "Imagine 2 woodcutters," Richard explained. "One swings his axe for 12 hours without stopping. The other works only 10 hours, but takes breaks to sharpen his axe." He handed Thomas the dull axe and asked him to strike a log. Thomas swung several times, but the blade barely cut the wood. Then Richard used the sharp axe. With only a few powerful swings, the log split apart. "You've been working like the first woodcutter," Richard said gently. "You are working hard
with a dull axe. He then explained 3 important principles. First, systems are more powerful than effort. Richard's irrigation system watered crops automatically, saving hours of manual labor. Second, focus is more effective than doing everything. Richard grew only 2 crops that grew best in the local soil, while Thomas tried to manage 5 different crops. Third, rest improves performance. Because Richard slept well and rested, he could think clearly and make better decisions. Thomas realized something important that day. Hard work was not his problem. The problem was that he only knew how to work hard. From that moment, he decided to change. He installed a simple irrigation system. He reduced the number of crops he grew and focused only on the most profitable ones. He even hired help during busy seasons. Slowly, everything improved. 6 months later, Thomas's farm produced 40% more crops than ever before. But the biggest change was not just in his farm, it was in his life. He had time to eat dinner with Sarah. He had energy again. He was healthier and happier. Thomas finally understood the lesson. Success is not about exhausting yourself. It's about using your effort wisely.